Barrington Town Council to order at 6:53 p.m. All members of the council are present. We are doing this as a hybrid meeting, which means that the council is live in this room, but we do have some folks from residents in the room with us, others attending by Zoom. So we'll view into the future, I think, the way that probably going to end up being. If you have a question or would like to make a comment at the appropriate part of the meeting and you are on Zoom, please raise your electronic hand, which is down at the bottom of your screen, so that we'll know that you want to be heard, and then we'll bring you into the meeting as a participant so that you can speak. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd ask that you all rise and join me in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have been reading the land acknowledgement, and so I'll go ahead and read this. Akine and peace, we recognize the unique and enduring relationship that exists between indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. We acknowledge that we are in the ancestral homeland of the Pokanoket tribe within the original territory of the Pokanoket Nation. We commit to ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Pokanoket people whose ancestral lands and water we benefit from today. Akine. Thanks. Next item on our agenda is announcements, and our town manager, Phil Herbie, will take us through those.
President Carroll, I have fairly long list, so bear with me. First one is on Wednesday, April 13th, from 7 to 8 p.m. There will be a presentation at the Bay Spring Community Center, Historic Narratives, Slavery in Barrington. This is research completed by Roger Williams University history majors in partnership with the Rhode Island Slave History Medallions and Barrington Preservation Society. If you're interested, you should send an email to mbrum@rwu.edu to RSVP. On Saturday, April 23rd, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., Friends of the Anawans, East Providence, Public Works, and Barrington Land Conservation Trust are hosting Anawamska Creek Birthday Cleanup at Shaw's Plaza in Riverside. On Saturday, April 23rd, also the same day, at 10 a.m., from 10 a.m. to noon, there's some other Earth Day cleanups. The Barrington Lions Club is hosting cleanups in 3 locations at Barrington Town Beach, Cusco Park, and Veterans Memorial Park. Last week, the town had learned from the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank that its municipal resilience program action grant application was fully funded in the amount of almost $250,000. This will require a 20% match. Is that 25%? 20% match from the town. This is for shoreline adaptation and resilience projects within a number of sites in town. On Saturday, May 21st, there's the camp out at Barrington Town Beach. That was delayed a couple of times because of the pandemic. Advanced registration is required, and the cost is $20 per tent. If you go to our online agenda, you can find a link to register for the event. You can also go to the Barrington Learning Center.org webpage to find the registration link. Barrington Town Beach parking pass sales will start on May 2nd at noon. Also, go to the Barrington Learning Center webpage and you'll find the link for getting the parking pass. The update on tree planting and removal this is the period from March 1st, 2021 to February 28th this year. 78 trees removed, 110 trees planted. Two more announcements I have. April is Autism Awareness Month, which brings attention to the need for change through improved support, opportunities in education, employment, accessible housing, affordable health care, comprehensive long-term services. And finally, Barrington After Prom is seeking volunteers and donations. For more information, go find them on Facebook. Lots of information about that. That's a lot.
Thank you. Phil, we have somewhere else on the agenda. We don't have anything to talk about. The grant was just a
I just mentioned that.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that is what we're saying.
Okay, great. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on consent agenda. These are items that are considered routine by the town council and will be enacted by one motion. There won't be a separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. The request is for good cause, in which event it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Is there anything that any member of the council would like to remove from the consent agenda? Yes.
March 7th minute.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Would anyone who's present here want anything from the consent agenda for separate discussion? Anyone from who's attending virtually? Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item 8? So, is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Why don't we'll do them all together after we resolve on March 7th. So, Councilor Bryan, March 7th minutes.
So, the motion made regard to the legislation is reflected inaccurately. And the motion was actually made by President Carroll and seconded by Councilor Estelle. And it did not include, it was to have the legislation discussed by the planning board at their next meeting, which would have been April 5th. I think there was a typo in the memo for April 4th, and so it reflected as being put on our agenda. But the planning board wouldn't have had the opportunity to discuss it, so we don't get typo input. So I just wanted that reflected accurately because I'm going to bring that back up when we get to this later in the agenda.
So you're looking at agenda item 19 from the March meeting, right?
Yeah, I don't think they're not numbered in the minutes, but ordinances not discuss an act on recreational cannabis legislation. It's a very final item right before setting the agenda.
Last month wasn't the usual month, right?
Yeah.
We split the planning board.
Yeah, the first Tuesday, the first of the month is a Tuesday.
And their next meeting is Friday.
Right.
Does anyone have any? So what specifically are you wanting to correct it to ensure that reflected that the motion was made by me and seconded by?
I mean, that part of it should be accurate since I was changing it, but it was more changing because when this came on the agenda earlier than I expected, I realized that the planning board wouldn't have met yet, so I went back and looked and saw that the motion reads differently than it was stated in that the April 4th section, but that's what was in the recommended motion, right? It just didn't make it into the the actual motion. Okay. So I think it's discussion at, we didn't specify a specific time. We referred it to the EDC, to the planning board, and to the police chief for a later discussion.
Right, and we didn't specify a time. Okay. Mary, do you have those changes?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Does anyone have any concerns about those changes? Okay. Do I hear a motion to, I assume that's you.
Yeah, that's it.
Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes as presented for February 15th, March 7th, and March 10th, and the executive session minutes of February 7th, 2022? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on the Town Council contingency fund regarding the Wildlife Rehabilitators Association of Rhode Island and the West Place Animal Sanctuary activity in Rhode Island. This has come on kind of because both of these organizations help to deal with an issue that Barrington has, that the town has, which is injured wildlife. And we have been funding the Wildlife Rehabilitators Association for a few years because they take a certain number of, I think they took 21 last year. Am I right on that? It was 2021. I can't remember. Right. They took some number of animals with it.
In 2021, the town received 208 wildlife calls for service, help transport 14 civil wildlife.
Okay, so they took 14 in 2021. That did not make it into this year's budget, which is before the Committee on Appropriations. So I wanted to see if we had an appetite for funding that from our contingency fund. The other is the West Place Animal Sanctuary. They reached out. There are other towns that provide support for them, and they do believe that they have 2 ducks from Barrington there. So they were seeking $500.
Is it limited to the ducks though? That's the one they owe about. We don't allow them.
They said in the email exchange in London, they said that they haven't had a really good system in place for tracking origin of some of these calls. So two ducks basically, but they definitely know, but they're probably more than that. What the emails.
Our FBA way of verifying
I don't think we have to know because they don't know.
Yeah.
But we do know that our animal control officer does bring animals, not to the West Place, but to the Wildlife Rehabilitators Association. Does anyone have questions?
I just had a question. So it's a note in Riverby's note, but it's a note that 1,500 is included in the grant budget for WRARI. I'm assuming that's the 2022 budget as opposed to their budget.
Well, my recommendation would be that we continue to support the wildlife rehabilitators. They've done some of our work for us, and I would recommend that we fund it with $1,500. I don't see the need to fund the West Place Animal Sanctuary. We're already funding somebody who's taking our animals. I'm not sure how the ducks got to the West Place Animal Sanctuary. Seems to me that those were over the course of however many years, and you know that in just 1 year there were 14 animals placed at wildlife rehabilitators. I will make a motion to fund $1,500 to the Wildlife Rehabilitators Association of Rhode Island from the Town Council contingency fund. Motion made and seconded for the discussion.
I'm gonna support this, but if, when we notify Westcliff, if we can indicate if they put in a better way to track so that we would know how many animals they have that are being supported from Barrington, it could help us, make a gently different decision.
Yeah, I would suggest that we do that. I do that. Like, it's communicated, we just need some solid ground before we
Kathy, what was it? Kathy?
Hi, is that for FY22 you're funding it?
No, 23.
20, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Have they received, not Westcliff, the animal sanctuary, which the one that we funded in the past, have they received the funding from the current fiscal year's budget? Have they received funding in 2022?
They have allocated 1,500, but they have not received it yet or requested it yet.
So we should send them those funds, and then we consider this for next year's budget, and it would still hit them in the same. They get funding in 2022 and in 2023.
So we don't just send them a check, we wait for them to.
Yes, they request it first.
Okay. So are you suggesting that we?
Yeah, so next year, we'll have the money to fulfill the request this year. Next year, we would need to say, well, it's not in next year's budget, but we can recommend it. And then after July 1st of next year, we'd have the funding available should the council and FTM voters choose to fund it. And if not, then the council could decide to fund it with contingency.
Right. Well, so it sounds like what you're saying is this motion was intended to cover 2023 budget, not 2022.
We're funding next
We already funded the 2022, which is a year we're in.
Right, we funded the budget with it, but not the animals.
Right.
Or the rehabilitation.
Exactly. So my motion was intended to be for next year. But I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Are you saying that we don't need to do that because they never took the money this year?
Well, no, effectively we'll be funding next year's budget with this year's council contingency. In your motion, which I don't know if
It's not. We're not asking to fund the budget. We're just sending a check.
we'll just do it after July 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're already getting. I mean, they're getting 1,500. I thought they had already received it. I guess they haven't asked for it.
Kathy, did they receive the money last year?
In 2020?
2021.
I can look that up. I don't have the detail in front of me.
Mr. Hervey, the first note of this, of your memo says the town is in receipt of a request for 1460. So they have submitted the request, is that right? And then they will be awarded the 1,500, and then the motion would be to include it for the budget in 2023, at which time then they would submit that request.
We can follow up on that letter, make sure
The dates are right.
yeah, and it could constitute request for this current year's funding. So I'm sure we can just go ahead and reset one.
Why don't I just?
They requested and received the money for 2021.
Okay, so
And they've now requested for this.
got it. Okay, yeah. So back to the motion. Motion's been made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on interviews and appointments. This is, the first one is for the planning board, and this is 2 vacancies, first alternate, and second alternate. Mr. Rose has withdrawn, and I did see Brian Rua on there. Mr. Rua, could you please tell us a little about yourself and what you can bring to the planning board?
Hi, my name's Brian Rua. So I saw the opening for the planning board. I'm on the Economic Development Commission right now. And I originally joined that to try to help with bringing some people to the businesses in town. And I saw some of the actions of the planning board and the complete streets policies. And I thought that would be another good place that would help make the downtown area and everything more walkable and bring more people to those businesses. So I thought I could help out with help drafting some of that policy.
Any questions for Mr. Rua? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir, for your willingness to serve. Do I hear, did anyone want to make a motion?
Brian Rua as a first alternate to the planning board with a term to expire on May 31st, 2023.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rua.
Mr. Rua, you have to meet Friday.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is a maximum of 3-minute statement, and it's an agenda item for members of the public to speak regarding a topic that is not already on the agenda. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand, and when you're recognized, state your name and residency for the record. Yes, sir, for coming in, Mr. Rimmershitis, you get to go first.
Stand someplace so everybody can see.
As long as you speak up, I think you're okay.
I'll stand over here.
Okay.
Good evening, Tom Riverside, 1 Howard Street. I just want to thank Mike for that personal greeting of that last meeting, to thank me for in person. Big thank you, TR, on the football field, so I'm sure that'll happen.
It's on tonight.
Pardon?
It's on, no, we already bought the
We already
machine.
got that last one.
Yeah, hopefully that'll.
So it's nice to see you guys in person since the mandates were lifted as of last month. I just want to say thank you again for what you do. All right. My reason for this talk tonight is about the parade. I made a motion last council meeting to have the town manager be put in charge, and everyone on the council voted your way, which should be good in most of the cases, most of the time when all the information is given. I don't feel that all the information was given, especially since we have 4 new council people that have lived in town for more than 5 or 6 years. So history goes back longer than 5 or 6 years. The veterans have run this parade for over 60 years. The only thing the council ever did was approve the money that was authorized by the town manager to make sure it was enough money or not enough money, and then you would up or down whatever the amount was. You should remember this. You're a lifer of Barrington, so I think maybe something should have been done a little better. I don't know if people have hands across their butts or personal agendas or whatever, but I think it's time we throw in an olive branch to the veterans, give the veterans the authority to run the parade under the town manager, but have the veterans do it in the past. Let's get them back on board. I would suggest or make I can't require you to do that, but if you would think about maybe withdrawing your motion about having the town manager do the parade, put the veterans back in, that would be great. So let's stop the BS, put our heads together, get back on track, and get everybody back going in this town. It seems like we got to fight. That's not the way we want to be. So at this time, I would like to make a motion. Well, I can't make the motion, but I would like to see you withdraw your motion from the town manager or put it on the agenda for next month to maybe do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Did see a hand online.
It's gone down.
It's gone down.
I would like to speak.
Yes, ma'am,
Do
please.
you want me to stand?
As long as you speak up, I
Okay.
think folks can hear you.
This is also about the parade.
If you can state your name, please, and your
Laura
residence.
Larrabee, 140 Promenade Street.
Mhm.
You know, I really thought long and hard about what I was gonna say, and nothing came to mind except for, do any of you know why you made this decision? Have you even thought about it? Is there a good reason? Because you're taking this away from our veterans. For what? I mean, I tried to think about what a good reason could be, and I can't think of any. You know, like he said, they've done this for years. Why are you changing it? I mean, where did this come from? Why are you changing it? You know, from the public's perspective, this seems like revenge because of the flag. And it's, you know, it's not a good look. And, you know, as far as the veterans go, you know, honor the dead, support the living. Let them do this. It's theirs. It's not yours. This doesn't belong to you. It doesn't. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I would like to respond.
I think we're going to need to make a motion to add it.
Right, if you're going to respond, we need a motion to add this matter to the agenda for discussion purposes.
But Ms. Neisar
Hi.
would like to speak. We can do that.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Neistar. I'm 30 Adelaide Avenue. I have a lot of words that came into mind. And going back and past, I don't know why the veterans, between the flagpole and the parade, why this vendetta has been put upon them. These men and women who fought for our country and for our freedom and are buried, and yet we call it a summer celebration. I mean, I can't be more outraged. I can't be more outraged by the things that I've seen in the past with this committee that has put things upon this town, that has divided it in causing more bullying and diversity and negative feelings between this committee and the school committee. I have never in my life, I don't actually attend these very often, and I don't actually speak up very often because I've actually found it pretty well living. I love living in this town, but all of a sudden living in this town or this or that. But the veterans, my son's name is on that article. My other son also fought. And to find that the veterans are taking that away and calling it a summer, I am absolutely outraged. It's unbelievable where the common sense has gone, why the high school behaviors, we're gonna get you, seems to come from. Because we had a group that didn't feel that flags belonged on the flagpole. They had a right to say it, but they did not have a right to be punished by you, and you. None of you. And I'm outraged, and I can't understand it. Give them back the parade, for God's sakes. Get on with other things that are much more important that need to be done in this town. But give them back the parade. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, and also, I apologize. There are 3 letters, if anybody read these, that are all stating about the parade, and yet none of you read that. These 4 letters, actually, from people who want to know why that parade was taken away from them, why that decision was made, and why it was done behind closed doors. And I think that these 3 people, Ms. Pine, Mr. or Mrs. McQueen, or Mr. or Mrs. Cowden, wrote very nicely, and yet not even a mention, just through there. And that's all part of it. So I'm urging you to please make a motion to restore the parade to the veterans.
Yes, sir, please.
Scott Neisar, 30 Adelaide Avenue. One word,
Why? Why? And I guess secondly, how was your decision made? Was it made here in council chambers, or was this an executive decision? I don't know. Maybe you could tell me that also. Because if it was made outside of what goes on here, I've got a real problem, because then you're picking.
Anyone else? Seeing none, from no one from the public.
Can I just say one more thing? Real quick, I just want the board to know that, you represent the whole town. I'm sure you know that. You don't just represent your feelings and what you come up with. And, I know you don't care about my daughter, but my daughter's going to be a senior. She's a junior. And, this is where she was born, in this town. And after the school teacher thing the other night, she said to me, I can't wait to graduate to get out of this town. So this is what you are showing the kids, that this is what this town does to the veterans. These are veterans. We should not even be having this conversation.
Thank you. So in closing public comment, one member of the council wanted to make a motion to add this to the agenda for discussion.
I would add it to the agenda for discussion. I believe that there has been.
Let's we'll vote on that. Motion made. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Something else.
Yeah. So motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Please, Councilor Costello.
I believe, first of all, that I understand a lot of the outrage. I understand the history between what we've seen in terms of political action by individuals who are involved with the veterans. That I distinguished from the veterans as an organization. You have a coalition, Barrington United Veterans Coalition, and that's the political arm. And you have the Barrington United Veterans Council. Oh no, I know. And that's what I'm talking about. I think what's important, first of all and foremost, that we need to, I see good faith on all sides. I have seen public comments directed at the council. I know my colleagues. I know they're approaching this from a place of good faith. And I know this is not a decision that was made in isolation, just based upon my knowledge of their character. I also understand and have met with the chair of the ABC. And I know that just by virtue of the fact that they have decided, and some might say, well, they boycotted the town event last year. But we didn't have a parade last year.
Right.
There wasn't more of a boycott event. Plus, the fact that they were willing to come back this year and partake in the full town events and the parade, I think, shows good faith on the side of the veterans as well. We are neighbors here. We see a higher purpose, I think, on all sides toward Memorial Day. We can talk about other past resolutions, whether we can flag anything else. I don't think that's ambiguous at all. I think this has to do with everyone having a solemn, respectful event and intending to do that. And I think everyone on all sides wants to do that. When this motion was made, I anticipated a pro forma motion. I saw that we hadn't had a parade, as we said last year. And so my feeling was, well, the other events, whether it was a Go Forward event or there may be a street fair event coming up, there's always a planning that goes into it. Town Manager Cooney was directly involved in planning Go Forward. You have to coordinate with departments, fire, police, Parks and Rec, DPW. They all have to be involved. So it made sense to me that especially since we were in a state of emergency and we had not had a parade last year due to COVID, that we would direct the town manager to plan a parade this year. Now, who would he plan that with? Obviously, the veterans. The EDC would be the primary organization involved in doing it, as they should. And I believe that Vice President Helmut stated publicly that nothing in the motion prevented the EDC from working with the town to put on Veterans Day. So, given Colonel Dolshinas' reaction after the motion, I thought I should reach out to him the next day. And I did the next morning. And I said to him, I said, look, I don't think we'd strip you of anything. You know, there's no reason that the EDC can have the same role it's always had. It should be able to fully partake and plan this with the town manager. We need to have a town manager to do that. So I understand why we reacted that way. But give me, if there's any context, or if there's any history I'm missing here, let me know. Please don't. Colonel Dolcinos responded with what I thought was a long and excellent summary of the entire history, going back to the time before the BUC, when the VFW went for it. So this is kind of a unique operation. The vets have always run it, as I understand it. And I have been limited in trying to work out a compromise by virtue of the Open Meetings Act. I know my colleagues are coming at this in good faith. But you asked what the discussion was outside of the council chamber. None online. And I'm unable to really broker any kind of a compromise in the way that I'd like to because of open meetings, because people have to be able to speak candidly. And so I understand that works on both sides, but I've communicated that to Colonel Dolcinos. I do think that Colonel Dolcinos and the BUC, they have agency. They are representing the Barrington veterans in their official capacity. There has been probably some confusion between the fact that both the coalition and the council, coalition being the political arm, which anyone can join, very conservative, and the council being the official veterans commission within the town, have the same acronym. And I said it, look, you got to call your political arm the strike force or something different than a coalition. It causes some confusion and overlap. And I think within the community, I can see that for sure. And that, to me, is part of the problem. But no one can deny that VOEC has agency as an entity to represent the Barrington veterans. And therefore, as long as they do, and the public accepts, the people, residents in town accept them as such, it is my opinion that they need to be front and center in all events, including the parade, involving for Memorial Day and for Veterans Day. In fact, I take the position that the BUC should have its pre-pandemic status with regard to any and all events, including Memorial Day. If that isn't an attainable goal this year, I will return to that next year. I'm at least one vote on this council to restore them in that status. Because I think they certainly understand that what happened last year when they boycotted wasn't right. Wasn't right.
Ms. Neisar.
Was not moved to make, but also I don't think that them not being involved is the move to make from the council. I think that there should be and can be a room for compromise. With regard to the political differences, I mean, Colonel Dolcinos and I, we're going to disagree on politics. We're going to debate. We're probably going to vote differently on in 95% of all races and elections for the rest of our lives. However, Memorial Day is meant to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice so that our differing points of view can be expressed and so that our votes will have meaning. And I think that should unite us all. Regardless of what happens now, this is an ongoing process. And I'll commit to working for it, and I think that ultimately the best solution would be for the BUBC to have its pre-pandemic status with regard to but that is, as I said, we don't have that on the agenda to act. That is an ongoing discussion and matter. And I'm willing to begin to work on it.
Ms. Neisar, there's no public comment.
So I want to know where we stand, and where I stand. I believe that this certainly should be something where the entity that has agency for veterans in Barrington should be in front of the center. It should have its pre-pandemic status with regard to Memorial Day. I'm taking that position. I will continue to work toward that end as long as I'm in the seat.
Okay. Anyone else on the council want to be heard on? I'll just say that my father was a veteran, my uncle was a veteran, my cousin who lived in this town was a combat veteran. I think this town has done a lot for our veterans. You can't throw a rock without a veterans memorial in this town. And since I've been on the council, which hasn't been that long, we've added 2 more memorials. One of them, the bridge, which we always know was a white church bridge. So yes, I have lived here most of my life, as has Rob, who grew up here as well. And to say that, and also I should point out that we have dramatically increased the tax relief available to veterans and to Gold Star families. We've dramatically increased it. I don't know if it's doubled, but it's got to be close to that. So we've done a lot for veterans, and to say that we are insulting veterans in some way is insulting itself. We can't make a motion to that tonight. We can't do that. It's not on the agenda. I will say that we have reached out to the UBC, whichever it is. And I know that the town manager met with them. And they have conditions before they would do anything, have anything to do with the parade. I think one of their conditions is that they have final say on this. The reason that I brought this up is because I don't think they can. And the reason I don't think they can is because for a couple of Veterans Days and a couple of Memorial Days, they've placed signs that are political signs. They want to say, keep politics off our pole. That's perfectly their right to do on their own lawns. It's not okay to do that. It's not okay to do that when you're celebrating Veterans Day. That's about the veterans, not about your political position. Our town manager told Bill Groves, we can't have this year. And they did it again.
My husband had surgery.
We told Bill Groves was to relate it to Paul. I don't know if that happened, but when I went to the Veterans Day event, there they were again. It's not appropriate. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to put any kind of signs advocating for any kind of operation on Veterans Day or Memorial Day. Those are important holidays that ought to be down the middle. But they have to be. They have to be celebrated with the appropriate solemnity, and they haven't been in a couple of years. So that's why I wanted to do it. I can't speak for my colleagues. But anybody else on the council want to discuss this? Okay. Moving on to the next item, which is update on redistricting the Board of Canvassers. We have Kim Brace and Ryan Taylor.
Sorry, I'm not seeing him, Ryan. Oh, thank you. Oh, there she is. It's a gentleman.
Okay.
Mr. Brace, please, go ahead.
Yes. Hello there. My name is Kim Brace. I'm president of a company called Election Data Services. I raised my hand during your initial thing in terms of public comment and quickly realized I did not want to get involved with the parade. So I'm not here to talk about parades, but something a little bit maybe less controversial, dealing with redistricting and re-precincting. We have been involved in the state of Rhode Island for 5 decades now, working with state and local governments. We are now here in Barrington talking about the changes that have been brought about by the state legislature in terms of your districts that were put in place by the state legislature and what that ultimately means for re-precincting. There was an excellent memo that was put together by your chairman of your board of canvassers, Claire Boyes. If you have that, that's gives you a lot better and good outline of what we have done. But in briefly form, what we have looked at is looked at the state house and state senate districts to see how that imposes some restrictions on what we can do for precincts. And of course, the entire town is in one state senate district, so we don't have to deal with state senate district boundaries. But you do have 2 state house districts that break apart Barrington. So we needed to look towards where those boundaries were. We have put together 2 maps of those. And if you have those in front of you, that might be something good to take a look at as I'm presenting. I also have them on my screen. If you want me to share a screen, I can do that. If you give me permission to do that.
Can you do that?
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Brace, I think you got muted again when you changed.
Mr. Brace, you cannot mute yourself.
Oh.
There you go.
There we go. Is that better?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Sorry about that. Yeah, first of all, can you see the screen?
You can. And
okay, very good.
66 and 67. And then
right. So what
section.
this is 2 different plan IDs. We have looked at not only the impact of what the state senate, or I'm sorry, state house boundaries have in your town, but then what is the result in terms of precinct boundaries? And we are in the middle of a little bit of a quandary from the state legislature. Right now, the state law says that precincts can have no more than 3,000 registered voters, but there is an attempt to increase that from 3,000 to 3,500. That bill has passed the state house, but it has not passed the state senate. So Barrington, like all other 38 cities and towns, are caught in a quandary of what to do, because the Secretary of State is asking that all towns get their precinct boundaries drawn by April 15th. And so what we have done with Barrington, as we have with our other towns that we're involved with, is look at 2 different alternatives. Plan A is what happens and how we could draw precincts if we can go up to 3,500. We can do that in the House District 66 portion with only one precinct being more than 3,000, that being precinct 2. But you see that in the 67 House District portion of the town, there are 2 precincts, both of which are over 3,000, almost up to the upper limit of 3,500. So this is the quandary that we have in terms of your town. Now, we have looked at the other alternative, and that is this alternative, which is to include a 6th precinct and use that 6th precinct to divide the precincts in House District 67 into 3 individual precincts as opposed to 2. By doing that and doing this kind of a configuration, we are well underneath the 3,000 limit, and we've made some adjustments in precinct 2 also to accommodate that and bring those all under 3,000. We have, as we have in most towns, we have been cognizant of what population change might be occurring over the next 10 years. And so we've talked with the town planner to try to see if there's any new developments that are coming in that we need to be cognizant of that could put us over any kind of a limit. So we've taken that into consideration also. And then we have worked with your canvassing board to look at what polling places might be useful and usable in the territory that we have. In Rhode Island state law, you have to have the polling place should be within the precinct boundary. So, so we've worked with Marie to get polling places set up. But right now, what we've done is tried to get the precinct boundaries set, and that's what we wanted to come to you before so that you could take a look and hopefully approve these as possibilities, awaiting, of course, what happens with the state legislature. I'd be happy to answer any questions that people might have.
I don't think we have any questions, Mr. Brace, but thank you very much for your presentation.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much for my opportunity to talk to you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on town council goal setting, and I think Councilor Breyer asked that we put this on.
Yes. There weren't really any specific goals I was looking to discuss further. I think we did. It was a really valuable session that we had, and I really appreciated the experience going through it, talking through some of those larger things. I just, I was curious if anybody else thought something was missing or thought something was conveyed. I didn't, but I was curious if anybody elected. And also, a lot of it we are already working towards. I thought it might be good to discuss when we might want to check in and see, talk about the progress we've made toward them and maybe either change goals, add new ones, or something like that. I was thinking the fall would probably be a good time, but I thought it might be worth potentially a special session to just talk about those items. But, could be set when we see what the agendas are like in the fall. If they're fall special sessions, they're not particularly fall. But it was nice to have the opportunity to really just discuss things, not driving at a particular, what are we going to vote on this, but just what we're talking about. So I just wanted to.
And things that were most important, not just what came up.
Yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to keep on the radar. I don't know that we just had it down for, as you mentioned, particular meeting, the agenda specific, but we certainly will keep on the radar. At least we have our, not direction, at least, that we know that we're working towards. Right. So yeah, I agree with the helpful session.
I think it was an excellent session. I think that, you know, one emphasis, and I like the spirit of this because it of course, with Rash's emphasis on not just goal setting, but charting the goal achievement, you know, and that's to the extent that we can do it. Maybe there's my own bias too. But I think that it's kind of thing where it's somewhat fluid as to when, you know, should we specifically accomplish the goal, but that is something that we discussed, and I think making reference to it and reminding us that is valuable because it sort of charts the course a bit for us when we, you know, when you do face, you know, expected events, or you get bogged down focusing on a particular issue, whether it might be in our case with financial topic and budget seasons. We're thinking about this thing properly. So I think it's something that all I can say is I would encourage my colleagues to let's hold each other accountable. And it's, you know, it's purposeful.
I would love to do it in the fall again and kind of be more regular agenda item. I'd also love to see public input on the discussion. It would be helpful to have the community engage with us, not just when it's around a topic, but as a whole, and to come together. Almost like a mini comprehensive plan.
On that note, in advance of whenever it is that we talk about it again, sharing these goals, what Ms. Moran put together for us, saying, you know, come ask us how we're doing on these things and what's coming next.
Or come with ideas.
Right, yeah.
What you'd like to see.
Yeah.
Are we doing the right things? Are we on the right track? Are there other areas where do a different, have a different perspective or look at something in a different way? And I think it would help to bring the community together. Because in some elements of this that tonight, I completely agree. We're very divided community. People tend to stand on either side of items as opposed to really understanding what the nuance and impacts can be across the board. So I think it'd be really good for public input and
we did actually ask for public input, but we didn't do a long lead time for I think we did 3 weeks or something. So maybe it's possible to do something on a banner that has a link to the goals that we discussed. It's document from and an invitation for people to provide input. I don't know how we can all individually certainly do that, but I think it'd be nice sort of as a group. Please go ahead.
That's the boss. We'll be moving into our conference plan update phase 2023 or so. Ahead of that, we could do a really detailed professional type of polling for the community. We'd like to do that for these 10 years. We haven't really done that in great detail in your previous updates, but that could be moved up, tying into the goal setting of the council to get all that input ahead of time. Then we need to conference plan.
And that would, you think that would be covered by I know there was additional funding for the comp plan update.
I think it would be, because you would be doing that work anyway, you just would go the timeline, you get that input a little bit further than you might have otherwise.
Yeah.
That can help shape how you bid out the RFP. They can understand what council goals are and focus input.
Okay. So do we need to put that on an agenda for a future meeting, or is that something you can put something together for us? And,
yeah, well, the question is how much that might cost, whether it's council approval. If you want to consider what the questions are that we ask, that might be something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. Let's see if we can get it on next month's agenda. So we can have some time to think about it too. I'll think further down the road. June. Okay. Yeah, let me know if it's actually just the key area. Full-fledged budget season, so. July.
It's like July.
Yeah.
June meeting gives like the whole 4 or 5 days after budget season.
I'm plenty of time. Yeah. Late July would be ideal, honestly.
Okay. July, I think it's the 26th.
And getting the survey out in the summer is not going to be super productive.
We could design it in the summer.
Right.
Yep.
Anything else on that? Next item is to discuss and act on resolution urging the General Assembly to consider amendments. Now we did, as Councilor Breyer mentioned earlier, we referred the issue of legalization to our EDC, our police chief, and planning. And we haven't had a chance to get all that feedback. We got some. I think this resolution that the League of Cities and Towns put together is a little bit different than that. So there's kind of two pieces. One is that we as a town council, as it stands, if the legislation passed, would need to either opt in, or if we wanted to opt out, put it on the ballot so that the folks in town would have an opportunity to vote to opt back in. I think that's essentially how it's written now. That's one piece of that part. And then another piece of that part is that we could, if we decide to opt in, create some zoning around it that would limit it to certain areas. And we talked a little bit about that last time. This other piece is talking about the bills themselves. And the resolution that the League of Cities and Towns has put together would give greater control to cities and towns, would give greater funding to cities and towns, receiving a minimum of 3% of sales tax, and the greater control by being able to opt out, additional funding for safety grants and impact fees, and so on. And so this is intended, I think, by the League of Cities and Towns to kind of advocate on behalf of the cities and towns to have more authority in this process than the state is currently contemplating bills. So that's what this resolution is, and I thought we'd talk about that first.
So why I brought up the timing in the minutes was because so there are two resolutions attached to this, and I wanted to recommend that we wait on the referendum resolution until at least next meeting. But I agree that we should certainly discuss the resolution suggesting amendments to the state legislation because that's time sensitive. It's substantially similar to a resolution that we passed in May of 2021 because the bills are pretty similar to what they were last year. This time it has the actual bills in it when it was just, I think, the governor's proposal the last time. And so I support just about everything in it, but item 6, where it talks about employee safeguards, we amended that last time, and I'd like to suggest the same amendment, and that's that I believe employers should be able to set safeguards for employees, but I don't think they should be able to compel medical prescription information from employees. And so to just leave it at the language which we agreed to last time was employer safeguards must be allowed to ensure a safe work environment, and have that be the extent of item 6.
Vice President? Yes.
Thank you. So I have two comment/questions. My first is a question just for clarification. And this goes to the opt-in, opt-out, which might, as Mr. Breyer just mentioned, might end up being next month. But for clarification purposes, if you opt in, my understanding is that it just gives you the opportunity to have more control. It doesn't it's not necessarily a yes or no on whether something is going to go forward in town. Is that
Right,
correct?
which is why our advice is no matter what, that we put some zoning restrictions.
Okay. All right. So thank you. That's what I thought. That's good clarification. And then the second, I do agree with Mr. Breyer that it'd be good to put that one on for the next month. So, for, in my opinion, for two reasons. Number one is so that the planning board can look at it, because that was our intention. And number two, this is the type of legislation that, given its local connection, I would think would be of great interest to the public. And there's been no interest from the public, it seems. So it would be nice that if we have this on our agenda, that we have some sort of public hearing or public comment or public input session, so that we can hear what folks think about this as kind of a preview. I'm hesitant to continue to move forward on something. I know that we're also constrained by the General Assembly's own time frame, so time is ticking as the months go by. But I just think it would be helpful, and I think it would be appreciated by the community if there was at least more opportunity for community engagement and opinion on this.
So should we just block off some time at our May meeting and try to make a push to let people know that this is coming down the pike and this is your chance for you to be heard? Yes.
Actually, something Vice President Hunt said made me realize that another benefit to delaying, and we're going to have a question for the town clerk in just a second, but is to know what the final bill is. I mean, that could really inform whether we think this is something that needs a referendum or something that doesn't necessarily need a referendum. Right now, we could say it doesn't need one, but then the General Assembly changes it substantially, and we think, oh, no, it does. By when would you need to know what's going to go on the November ballot?
I think in the past, I usually have your approvals and your motions on those questions for the ballot by July. I think it has to go usually August 4th.
By the beginning of July or by the July meeting? Because the July meeting is at the end.
Right. I want to say that I think we could do it by the end of July. I think our meeting is July 26th. And usually it's around the first few days of August that Secretary of State needs those questions.
And this one's prescribed. We can't change what it says, so it's just whether it's included or not. Would anybody be opposed to waiting until the July meeting?
So are we talking?
Just purely on the referendum resolution.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're definitely waiting because we wanted to. I think we all agree the planning board should weigh in at least. But if we could sort of just clear this one out.
Sure.
And this is the resolution kind of asking the General Assembly to make some modifications. Councilor Breyer suggested this change, employer safeguards, and then you can delete everything after that up to ensure a safe work environment. That's the end. And we'll insert after employer safeguard must be allowed. So, okay. Any further discussion on this resolution? Okay. Do we hear a motion to pass the resolution as presented and amended? Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay. So on this,
President Carroll, I have some feedback from people listening on the other side of Zoom. If you face the microphones when you speak, the microphones in the ceiling pick it up pretty well. If you turn your head and you speak, it gets a little hard to hear.
Okay.
I just want to let you know that.
I will work on that. Okay, so now to the resolution authorizing a referendum. I guess, I don't know that we need to wait till July because they could pass it before then. So if the General Assembly passes something, I think it's at that point that we need to weigh in, but no later than July, because if they haven't passed it by then, it's going to be tough to get it on the ballot if we choose to go that way. I do think that after getting some input from planning, we can create zoning, right? Even if we don't end up like supporting this. If we all said we're not interested in this, we could still get flipped by the going through a ballot.
That's correct.
So it makes sense for us to really consider some zoning around this. It's hard to kind of predict, but when you look at what happened in Massachusetts, there were long lines of cars, at least initially. That may not be the case because Massachusetts is a stone's throw away, so it's not that far for existing. But if we were to do it, I still think we ought to consider where we want to have it, neighborhood business district or not. So I would recommend that we address that piece, even separate from the referendum. Does that make sense? Okay, so we'll wait for the planning board to come back on that, and then we'll bring this back up. And then on the referendum, I'll recommend that we wait until either the General Assembly acts or May 26th, whichever comes first.
And actually, I was realizing with the importance of public input on this, the July meeting isn't ideal unless we have to wait that long. So
yeah,
but we don't want to come to a meeting end of July.
Yeah. Okay.
Two things.
Yeah.
One, I confirm it is on the agenda for planning tomorrow, so we will have it. Secondly, one element is while we're in public meeting, I want to give the throws out that EDC considered, and one reason that they voted the way they did, is there was some concern that if we were to put it on a referendum ballot in November, we might miss out on licenses, not which is any of the limited number. I want to know if that's true or not. And I don't know if that would be a better question posed to our state legislature, or if the solicitor's office would be able to inform us as to the pacing of this, so that we wouldn't, should the town choose to want to go forward, we wouldn't compromise ourselves in any way.
I understand that those decisions will be made after those elections, but let's try to do that.
If that's the case, then I might ask the EDC to consider that piece of information, which would be counter to what was the rationale in part of their vote. It may not change the vote, but maybe that would give them time to reconsider on their agenda if it turns out that they voted in part based on a false premise. Again, that may not change the outcome of the vote, but they should be paid for.
The legislation does take effect upon passage, and I see October 1st as when the existing medical cannabis centers can begin selling. And so it could very well be that once it passes, the state can start issuing licenses, because the state has said they will not issue licenses to any community that is going to be holding a referendum. So that could be to the point like EDC, if it is something that we want, if it is an opportunity we want to take, we could miss the opportunity.
If we, Mr. Ashilla, we can just,
I want to clarify.
I'll get an email out to the council.
if that interpretation is correct, then I wanted to mention the EDC, then they have voted based on the legislation, but we have to
Yes.
Medical or recreation?
Medical's already passed, obviously.
Right, but I wasn't sure if they were trying to push it forward, get more licenses down, so I haven't been following. So.
We actually have zoning around already. So we did that when medical passed, and I suspect that we're at least going to consider some zoning regs around recreational, because wherever we come down, you could end up with anyway, and I'd rather have it, not need it. Okay. Anything else on that? Next item on the agenda is to discuss and act on reallocation of loans at Barrington Middle School fund bond balance, and I'll ask our town manager to take us through that.
The Barrington Middle School Building Committee recommended to the school committee to declare the projects as substantially complete. The only outstanding item is the ongoing issues with the acoustical panels in the auditorium. They voted last week, I guess it must have been last week. And then following that up, the school committee on March 30th agreed and voted to release $4 million of the remaining balance. Bond balance is at least 4.7 million. I didn't really give a specific number on that. It's about 4.7, 4.8 million, possibly more than that. The release of the $4 million is now the question of what to do with this money is now in the hands of the town council. The town council would have to vote and adopt the resolution that, and the resolution has been provided to place this question on the May financial town meeting before voters at the financial town meeting. So this is $4 million, and there's additional funding to be basically released to the town in the future, possibly 700,000 or more, depending on what happens with the fiscal panels. And the town also has access, and we're still discussing what to do with the money. It's the 3.2 million in available balance that's unrestricted, that has not been approved for any use yet from the American Rescue Plan Act. The draft spreadsheet that has been reviewed by the ad hoc committee discussing the ARPA money includes a list of recreational improvement projects and sidewalks and some additional projects including cybersecurity and another issue that just came up was the need for additional funding for the megahertz radio system that the fire departments are employing. So the list of the ARPA money, I think the use of the ARPA money kind of needs to be in discussion with the bond money, because if you use bond money for what I'm asking is that it gets reappropriated for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure improvements on town properties and town rights of way, subject to voter authorization at the financial town meeting. Because if you, as you know, if you drive around town, you can see there's quite a backlog of sidewalk improvements that's going to be expensive. Almost $4 million. That's not going to address all the need, but it will a significant portion, and it's going to be, we have a very large number of kids that walk and bike to school, as you see in any of these schools. But if you look at some of the infrastructure near the schools, that's not on state roads that were improved on the highway, for example. A lot of that was with the state Booster School grant that the town was able to get from the state. Just look across the street, look across Lincoln, as terrible. And that's just been sitting there because we haven't had the resources to be able to fix that. And it can be expensive. It's curbing, it's drainage, it's sidewalk stuff. And this would allow us to implement a lot of these priorities throughout town and consistent in there that's consistent with the Complete Streets policy and the draft Complete Streets plan that's going to hopefully this document with the planning board and should be presented to the council in the next month or two. So that would be the recommendation. However, if you feel that you want to broaden the use of the funding, further determine when to spend some of that for some other purpose as well. But I was recommending using it for this bike and pedestrian improvements throughout town, and not using any of the ARPA money for bike ped improvements this month. So that would be the recommendation.
Okay. And before we get into that, you provided a draft resolution. Looking at the resolution, you're talking about $4 million, and I don't see that number here in this resolution. So I'm not sure if I would like.
Kathy's on Kathy's on.
This is bond council putting this together, and sure, we have to take the right steps. But
That's correct. Bond council put that resolution together.
so even though it doesn't say anything about the $4 million here,
It should. It should reference the 4 million there. It references the money being allocated from FY23 and a remaining balance from the balance for FY22 and the remaining balance from FY23 after debt service is paid off.
Right, it never lists what the end of that equation is anywhere.
so it doesn't have a dollar amount for the.
As soon as $5 million of unspent bond proceeds.
Right, but the school released 4, and then there's the 1 million number here. So I was curious, are we talking about 4 million that came to the town, but only 3 million available to spend because 1 million is encumbered? Or
After the first resolution was completed, because we were basing it on what was going to be left over after the school kept approximately $1 million. The vote last Monday from the building committee was to turn over $4 million to the town. And the resolution was changed to $4 million. It should say the 4 million. I don't have it in front of me, but it should say $4 million.
Okay.
Turned over to the town.
we might have the school.
I think, can I ask, suggest an amendment? Kathy agrees. Is that okay?
Sure.
I think it said where it says, whereas due to prudent procurement and contract administration remains approximately $5 million, I'm just rounding up, non-spent bond proceeds, of which $4 million has been released to the town based on the determination by the school committee of substantial completion of the project.
So you're adding of which, right? $4 million has been released to
the town by the school committee after declaring the project substantially complete.
A few clauses later, whereas the town projects that there will be approximately 1,043,272 of unspent proceeds available to offset fiscal year 2023 debt service. Is that deducting from the 4 million that was released to the school? Or is that where?
I think that's where the 4 million is supposed to appear.
That's part of the 4 million.
That's part of the 4 million.
So we have 3 million.
That's a subset of the 4 million.
Right. So we have 3 million now.
I think it's a little bit complicated in how the bond service is getting paid.
What has to happen is when the project is substantially complete, regardless on your vote tonight, the trustees are going, the town doesn't hold the money. The trustees are going to apply, and they have applied, the April 1st debt payment from the extra $4 million. On October, there was the bond payment for April 1st was approximately 2.9 million. In October, we'll be paying just over another $1 million. What happens for budgetary purposes at the end of the fiscal year, if the town council votes to approve the resolution, and at the FTM, the taxpayers vote to approve the resolution, there'll be a unbudgeted surplus on the principal and interest line of the budget. That at the end of the fiscal year of 2022, we get transferred to a capital reserve fund per the resolution. And I questioned Karen because she didn't have it in the resolution about the FY23 proceeds, and that's why the FY23 proceeds also was added, which was just over $1 million. So at the end of FY23, that as well would have an unbudgeted amount that was not spent that would get transferred into the capital reserve fund for whatever specific purposes the resolution states or is changed to.
So do you think you could send Kathy so she has it in front of her, the resolution? Or Kathy, if you could go onto the clerk base, you can see it there. It's different. It's entirely possible I'm missing something, but I'm looking at it and it appears to me I share the same questions that Jacob has. I can't tell what this 1,043, where it's coming from, where it's going, how much we're starting with. And when we say approximately 5 million unspent bond proceeds.
The 5 million is approximately what's left now, but the school's going to be spending some of that. That's why it specifically was stating last Monday that 4 million was going to get turned over to the town.
Is that, so when we say 4 million, is it like roughly 4 million or exactly?
It should be $4 million because there's approximately just under 4 million of debt service between April 1st, last Friday, and the October 10th payment that's coming up next year.
That's the 1043. I think that's the 1043. Is that the 1043, Kathy?
Yes, it is. That's the FY23 payment.
Okay, so let's start with the 4 million. You have the 5 million unspent bond proceeds. The second whereas clause, Phil, and you added this language, of which $4 million.
That's sorry.
I started to, and then that's right.
I did if you want me to.
I had such a good sentence number.
Of which approximately 4 million has been released to the town after something that I can't read my handwriting on. Project substantially.
Oh, after the school
project.
committee declared the project substantial.
Correct, but Jacob's right. We would strike approximately.
It would be 4 million.
Exactly.
Okay, I think I have the resolution in front of me. So
just let me make sure that we're all on the same page with this one.
okay.
So I have the second whereas clause saying approximately third whereas, sorry. Approximately $5 million in unspent bond proceeds and then insert, of which $4 million has been released to the town by the school committee. Is that?
It was the school committee.
That's
Building committee's advisory.
And then it sounds like we can leave it like that because it is 4 million even. It's not approximate.
That was the vote.
Okay, great. Now, so what happens going down to, if anybody has questions about the other two whereas clauses after that, the town projects there will be approximately 1,043,272 unspent proceeds. What does that come from? Does that come from the 4 million? Or is that in addition to the 4 million?
What was that amount like that you asked about?
So if you're looking at the resolution,
Yep.
it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whereas down from the top. Whereas the top projects there will be approximately $1,043,272. You see that?
Yes.
Is that money supposed to come from the 4 million or is that?
It's part of the 4 million.
Okay, so we would subtract from the 4 million that amount, and that will leave us with a certain amount that we can do for the.
No, we're going to get the full 4 million. But what makes up the 4 million is going to be in FY22, we are going to underspend debt service by approximately 3 million. That money at the end of the fiscal year will get transferred into a capital reserve account as if it was spent. It's all a bookkeeping way of doing it. At the end of FY23, there's going to be just over $1 million in debt service that's going to be under budgeted. At that point in time, we transfer that as well into the capital reserve fund. So we will have approximately $4 million to use for capital reserve projects between the end of fiscal year 22 and the end of fiscal year 23.
Okay.
Because we won't be putting the cash out.
I'm gonna take a stab at a change that hopefully is correct and clear. So in the middle of the now therefore be it resolved clause, to the shall be presented in front of the voters at the FTM a resolution which would appropriate $4 million, which consists of the monies in excess of amounts needed to pay fiscal year 2020 debt service, 22 debt service on the bonds, and fiscal 2023 debt service. Is that correct?
That would be correct. It would be FY 2022 and FY 2023.
Yeah, well, and not having the reappropriate $4 million, which is the excess money. Because it sounds like otherwise it's the excess after those two debt services, but really it represents the excess that would be left after they are spent.
Right, and we are reappropriating money because we are appropriating money from the debt service to this capital reserve account. That's why reappropriate is there.
So it's certainly $4 million to allocate.
To reappropriate to capital reserve.
So, tell me if I'm wrong, Kathy. It sounded to me, like you said earlier, that the $4 million, which is $4 million precisely from the school committee, that amount we are going to subtract something from and then add something back into.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't hear it that way because that was confusing to me. So what's the point of having this $1,043,000?
Bond council wanted to list the debt amounts for FY23 because that was after what we had already paid for FY 2022.
So similar, I think, to what you.
If you want the wording changed, this doesn't have to be voted on tonight as long as we have a vote by the end of the fiscal year or prior to the financial town meeting in May. And I can ask bond council if we could just say reappropriate FY22 and FY23 debt. But
so my confusion is that the school committee took a very clear step and said, we don't need this $4 million. We're giving it back to the town. We don't need it for the project. It's $4 million. It wasn't $4,001,000. It wasn't just under that. It was exactly $4 million. And then we start talking about approximately $3 million and approximately $1 million. And that's where I get confused. Isn't it $4 million precisely?
The debt service is not $4 million precisely now.
No, the amount that we will have to spend on sidewalks and bicycle lanes.
Yes, that will be $4 million. But we're reappropriating part of debt service to get it into the capital reserve account.
Please.
So, and I'm going to push this to Kathy, but thanks for sticking with us. So, we get $4 million. Of that $4 million, we need to pay X amount towards fiscal year 22 debt service. Correct?
The town's not going to physically pay that money.
But of that, it's going to come from the $4 million, correct?
It's going to come from the money that's still in the bond account with U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank's going to take the money out of the account and just pay the debt service with it. So there's no cash flow from the town to pay that. It's going to be an unbudgeted amount at the end of the fiscal year. So you're going to have like a $3 million surplus. But instead of it going to the general fund, we're going to take it and reappropriate it to the capital reserve fund.
Right, but the $4 million, that's that we don't have that in any fund of ours right now. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
At the end of fiscal 22, are we going to be allocated or funds transferred in the amount of $2,956,728?
Correct.
Beginning of 23, or the end at some point in fiscal 23, there will be another transfer to the town capital reserve account for $1,043,272. And that's where the exact 4 million comes from.
Is that the first number, a number that we can plug into the resolution?
No, well, that's,
Okay.
if Kathy said yes.
So was Jacob correct?
Yes, those numbers, I'm not saying add up exactly to 4 million, but you will have exactly 4 million in the capital reserve account. He's exactly correct with the FY22 and the FY23 figures to debt service.
Are we able to amend this now, therefore, may it be resolved paragraph to walk through those steps?
Yes, you can. You are free to amend. Well, you need to check with bond counsel, right?
Right, I would suggest you make any changes tonight, and I can go over it with bond counsel tomorrow, and you can readdress this at the May meeting.
At the May meeting, you readjust.
Okay.
So, Kathy, you know what they want to do. They want to plug those two numbers in so that when we get to the FDM, the people can see that.
Sure.
If they could provide language for the
Yeah,
resolution,
right.
that would be on the FTM agenda.
Have Karen Grandy do that then.
Yeah,
Will do.
right. So I think it needs to be, I'm sure she has to have some things to go through for all of the agreements that we've entered into. But it needs to be clear that what we're saying is we're taking $4 million that was part of this bond and we're using it for sidewalks and bike paths. We haven't even talked about that yet, but let's just say we all agree on that sidewalks. So it just needs to be clear that that's what's happening. Okay. So I don't know if I could possibly suggest language on this, so I would rather let bond counsel take a shot at it.
And I would just continue the matter to the May agenda. And I can work with Kathy if need be. I know exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. If Phil wants to add something you want to add.
I didn't know if you want to discuss whether that was the appropriate, it doesn't need, you talk about your goals, let's talk about infrastructure and sidewalks and bike facilities. So I just want to say that I thought that was an excellent idea.
Yeah, so I agree, and I wanted to check that off to see, because I think we're all aligned on that it's a good idea to use it for the things that are listed at the end here. Pedestrian bike facilities, paving, drainage, traffic control. We actually did include over here streets and sidewalks. So does anybody want to tweak that or change that in any way, or is that acceptable?
I agree with its use. I was curious if the language is too broad or if all of sort of everything that follows bike and pedestrian infrastructure is needed as part of those projects. But it sounds like it got pretty broad.
It's all related to the type of projects with traffic control or pieces of the road. Maybe blend in.
And those would all be projects of the size that each individual item is going to come back with the council as well. One question I have, though, is if the council were to take no action, the money would just go to pay back principal on the bond. Okay. Is that what happens if this resolution fails at the FTM, or does it come back to the council and we propose something else at future FTM?
Kathy, do you know the answer to that?
If the council doesn't adopt the resolution, then there's nothing to go to the financial town meeting. Or if the council does adopt the resolution and the financial town meeting says no, then we'll have $3 million extra in the general fund at the end of this year. So we're trying to utilize these funds for projects versus having to go back to the general fund and borrow money and have to pay S&P fees and Moody's fees and more interest when the money's readily available right now.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be used to pay down principal. I think that was the question.
Right, so it's by putting it on the FTM, it's a choice to either fund what we're suggesting it fund or simply go into the general fund.
I guess somebody at the FTM or before could propose that we use it for some other purpose.
It's got to depend on whether that motion comes how many days before, or if it's within the 50,000 on that evening, so
Cloudy.
it's cloudy.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think we're good on that. We'll continue this and we'll come back to this at our next one.
Excuse me, I just want to make sure that I am not using the language that you and Mr. Breyer, Councilman Breyer, suggested to help give to Kathy proposal.
No, I think
Just leave it.
bond counsel is gonna, has an idea that we want to make it clear that we're talking about $4 million from this money that we intend to use for this and how we can make that clear. She may want to include the steps that they're going through, and that's fine with me, but it just, you want to be certain that it's clear at the end of the day.
Okay.
It's 4 million, we're going to get 4 million, and we're proposing to do this, and the folks at the FT will decide.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear, just to make sure that Kathy doesn't need this information tomorrow morning.
No, I think it would go straight to bond counsel.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is to discuss an act on a green memo format. This is Council Ryers.
As I mentioned last month, the idea came about from a discussion we had during the goal setting meeting when Councilor Conway mentioned having sort of parameters that we can use to guide decisions. And in thinking about it, one thing we want to incentivize is the exploration of environmentally friendly purchases. And so the idea of a green memo or a green line on bid requests would be to, the purpose of it is so that when department heads are submitting a request, it will include a few sentences that's really just a common sense approach to explaining to us that not necessarily that environmentally friendly options were looked at. And if that's the decision that they're recommending, if that's the purchase that they're recommending, they would then explain why. We think that this should be purchased because X, Y, Z. If they think that the environmentally unfriendly is the one to go with, it would also then just explain why. I shared it with a few folks who are, pretty environmentally conscious, including some members of the Resilience and Energy Committee, and they seem to like the idea. One person recommended making sure that it's known that we're not looking for deep quantitative analysis here on, the exact carbon footprint. And so we came up with a sentence that's included, which actually made it sound like we're probably looking for something much more involved and complicated. And so rather than voting on this, I spoke with Manager Hervey. He shared that the feedback on how it was sort of read, that it seemed fairly burdensome. So my recommendation is that we discuss it if everybody's on board, or at least a majority are on board with pursuing this, that we then refer it to the solicitor, the manager, and then the Resilience and Energy Committee, and I think Manager Hervey added the Conservation Commission, which I think is a great idea too. And they can then send us a draft of a policy that they think makes sense.
So I had some questions. I was thinking about it, looking at it, and your memo, which is not it is the memo. Did say it's not for thought-based services, like, right?
Oh yeah, I was thinking more marketing consultant, design consultant, architectural work. Like I don't know much about engineering, so I don't know if there's equipment that goes into it.
Right, I'm just thinking of like the engineering drawings that someone's going to put together for a project or something. That ultimately that kind of stuff I get. It's just somebody thinking and drawing.
Right.
So, but I'm wondering if there were like some other areas, and I was thinking about this, like firefighter turnout. For the life of me, to think of anything that would be, like an environmentally friendly piece of that. Meaning like their jackets that they wear, the pants and the boots, and elements and so on. Or we voted for battery-powered forcible entry tools. You know, I guess they're battery-powered, so they're not gas, but actually they would be hydraulic otherwise, powered by the gas truck, the diesel truck. And then I was thinking about things like police vehicle equipment, like we bought some of that, lights, cages, you know, computer equipment that's in the car, things like that. Would we ask them to do an evaluation on those things?
So my thought with that, and the reason for in the memo itself using a common sense approach, or in the policy of it, using a common sense approach would be, yes, they would still put that in the bid request, but it would be, you know, light bar for a new cruiser. The green memo would just be, you know, not applicable or not available. And if the council at the time, you know, a few years down the road wants to challenge that, sure, they can challenge that. But yeah, the idea is to really limit the burden, and it's mostly just to ensure that it's being given thought to.
Yep. So a couple months ago, we passed a green resolution, resilient revival resolution, and that provided specific direction for the town moving forward. And I believe that the manager has shared that. First of all, we did get the Mustang one. I really like it.
We're going to do statements everywhere.
Yes. I'm looking forward to a test drive, not a ride. That was something that was clearly, you know, there was some analysis. And I know that Phil is raising this with the department heads. So I guess my view is, I think we can tell them our goal is to do this. I know, for example, Alan Corby is already looking at battery operated lawn equipment. I don't think it's quite there yet. You know, every piece of lawn equipment I have is not battery operated, but I don't go 30 miles an hour back and forth on the fields like they do with that major equipment. And I think he's looking at that. And I think they're already looking at that, and they're being urged. So I don't know that we need to have them establish to us that there is. If we suddenly hear the Ford F-150 Lightning is coming out next year, I think that'd be a great truck for the DPW director. It's not going to be a truck to replace a snowplow because it just doesn't. It's not going to get big enough. But things like that, I think they're already doing. So that's why I don't want to add something to what they're doing beyond they're already looking at these things. And we can encourage that more, but I don't know that we need to ask them to do a kind of memo for us, and that's my concern. Anybody?
I like the principle, the concept, the objectives. I'm a little concerned just adding, I wouldn't say red tape to the process, but there are so many things to be purchased. There are so many things that we are engaged in as a town. And to filter out that which should and should not apply, how it should apply, and then to give weight to one or the other. It adds an element of complication to the process that I'm also concerned about. Although I am wholly on board with the overall goal, as I find it phrased. So it certainly needs further review. I would say before we would vote on such a thing. I don't think it's in any way a step backwards environmentally. I would want more understanding of how it works functionally. You know, and that would be something that we need a lot more detail on. And also what the marginal benefit would be over our overall need and objective to supervise and to encourage this. And also, I know obviously we hired a town manager who is also as big an environmentalist as any of us. You know, and so we at least have the administration. But I understand the idea of setting policy, but there's somebody else in the 10 years down the road.
And I get that. But to codify it is really challenging. And that's what concerns me.
I mean, if I hear the feedback from department heads or from either the solicitor or from either the committees that this would, create a burden that doesn't really have much benefit to it, it's not, something I'm gonna, dig my heels in and say, no, we must pass this. I think exploring is good. I think we have people in place who are already doing the right things. And as you said, down the road, it's good to have the policy in, but also even for right now, having public visibility that we're looking at this. Right now, we know, because we talk to them, we're at every meeting, when a bid comes across, if it's not for something environmentally friendly, we know the big look. But we don't know what they looked at or why they make that the environmentally friendly decision. And so this just gives a little more public visibility into the efforts we're going to. If that's the only benefit and this is burdensome, it's probably inefficient. But if there are marginal benefits, if it's not very burdensome, I think there's benefit.
Yeah, I don't have an objection to exploring. We're going to do that. I think we should. I agree with that. I like the spirit of it. And in the exploration, I think it might be helpful. I haven't done this personally, but how does it compare with that resolution? Is it duplicative? Is it something that we've already said in the resolution? Now we have policy, and I do agree that I don't want to overkill something with paper and have policies after policies after policies. I think everybody is on the same page on this. And I kind of take the common sense approach almost as the decision-making approach from our perspective, not necessarily from what they're going to be proposing to us, which in my mind kind of goes to the resolution in terms of the town's direction and what the town might be looking for. So those are just some of my comments. I like the spirit. I as of today, I don't know that we need policy because I think it might be covered, but I haven't done that comparison. I'd just be interested to see how that shakes out and things of that nature.
I'd like to hear the feedback too.
So we have some feedback from department heads. We can ask boards for feedback on the idea of doing this if they want to propose some language. It sounds like we're on the same page in terms of we don't want somebody spending half a day filling out this memo and doing it. But if they can, if there's a single line, a single question that is, have you considered green alternatives and what are they? And somebody can say yes or no. I can't think of some of them. For the firefighters. For a fire truck, I don't think there is an alternative just yet. Okay. So why don't we just ask I have a motion. Sure, go ahead.
To refer the draft green memo policy to the town administration, town solicitor, resilience and energy committee, and conservation commission to provide comments for the council's consideration at our June meeting.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded for the discussion.
The only question I have, we don't need to be so specific in the motion to give direction. Everybody has, we'll have notes from the minutes and folks can know what the discussion points are and points of comparison are.
Yep.
Okay.
You ready to vote? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Great. Okay, approval of the proposed settlement regarding national opioid litigation.
This is, as you know, there are a number of pending lawsuits. Last time we discussed the opioid litigation settlement that involved Johnson & Johnson. That was a payout over 18 years. The good news here is that these two, Teva and Allergan, the payouts are all at once, and Barrington is slated to receive $131,103. So it's a good settlement. It's being recommended by the Attorney General also. So I would recommend that you approve the settlement of the
Any discussion?
not at all opposed, I'm just curious, what's our alternative? Exactly. You're getting 2.3% of the overall, and it's based on a lot of things, on population, the number of. It's the alternative to try and negotiate. You would have to opt out, and the resources would beat up that.
Yeah.
31,000.
And I just wanted to point out before the motion, I'm going to abstain from the vote. I've recused in the past from these types of agenda items based on the discussion. This is more just reviewing the settlement. I'm not going to obviously recuse from the discussion, but I'm not going to vote on the motion. But going forward, I will be able to participate if it comes to discussions and then I will use those funds. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay. So why don't we do it this way? We'll make a motion, see if there's discussion. I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as presented, approving the proposed settlement of national opioid litigation involving Cuba and Allergan Pharmaceuticals. Is there a second? Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I just have a question. Would we then, when the money is awarded, then allocate it, or is that?
Yeah, if I can answer that, that's generally because I don't know when this is coming, but when it does come, you will have a discussion and there'll be categories of it can't be used as fabulous. Right. Sure.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That's okay. And one abstention. Sorry. We got 4-0-1. No resolutions. Discuss and act on bids. The town manager will take us through the first one, which is our solicitor.
The town council does right.
So the town council is responsible for hiring a solicitor, and it was recently pointed out that the town charter says that the town shall solicit RFPs for the town solicitor at least every 5 years, starting in January 2015, so we're a couple of years late. But so based on the vote of town council on February 7th, we issued an RFP for legal services. It was published in the Providence Journal. Proposals had to be received by the town no later than 11 a.m. on Friday, March 11th. The town received one proposal. The town's current solicitor, Priscilla Face Rich in Providence. The firm proposes to continue the present fee structure of $210 per hour for solicitor services and a flat monthly rate of $1,500 for criminal prosecution. So the recommendation is to award bid to Priscilla Face Rich as I just described.
I guess if they're the only one. No.
So why no one reads the Providence Journal?
I say that in all seriousness. The service that we've received from Priscilla Kites and Rich has been absolutely excellent. So I'm glad to see that they're back on board. So thanks for all your help.
It's an honor. It's been an honor to serve, and I thank you for the confidence you placed in us for all these many years. And I'm happy to continue. I'm serving we can use this time.
When I first went into private practice, my brother-in-law suggested a slogan that I have on my cards: "You could do worse, and we could do worse." So really, I would echo what Rob said. Really appreciate the good work that you folks do, and you're very quick. When I have a sort of, you guys are lawyers too, because you know exactly how to get to that point that I'm trying to articulate and haven't done it yet. So thank you.
I would just want to wholeheartedly concur as possibly the most challenging fit with your client. I would say, when I push back, you come back immediately with every question answered. And this is up and down the board, not just you, Mike, but everybody in the game.
I really appreciate that, because it is truly a team effort. Each of us brings our own special view and legal expertise in various issues.
Thank you.
Okay, so
I'd like to make the motion to award the bid for legal services to Ursillo, Tykes and Rich of Providence to serve in the capacity of town solicitor and assistant town solicitor for criminal prosecution, for zoning, planning and inspections, and for labor, with the fee structure set at $210 per hour for solicitor services and a flat monthly rate of $1,500 for criminal prosecutions.
I'll second that motion. Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstentions. Motion carries. Okay, next item is to award the bid to complete the croquet court lawn and bocce court at Library Cove. This has been a passionate project for one of our residents, and we finally got the bids in, and everything is all set. It looks like we have available funding, including $4,500 in the funds donated by private citizens for the project. So does anyone want to discuss this further, or should we just have a motion?
Question. It looks like it's named. Is that the name of it, or is that a placeholder? And how is that?
It's been informally called Library Cove, but as an informal name. That's everything.
No, so in the bid, it says constructing the Barrington Civic Center croquet and bocce facility.
That was
And it is within the Barrington Civic Center property, which
Okay.
is how the National Register application describes the area between, including the tech center, library building, and the town hall property. That's the Barrington Civic Center.
I hadn't seen that before, so it struck me. Okay.
Does anyone want to make that motion?
I'll move to award the bid to complete the new croquet court lawn and raised timber bocce court at Library Cove to Yoselil Brothers of 330 Station Street, Cranston, Rhode Island, in the amount of $58,050 to include an additional 15% contingency.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. Next item on the agenda is, we have one more, for bid for engineering services. Teresa, you want to just take us through this?
Sure. This is for the Harold Gibbs Woods Trail Project, Plat 31, Lot 64, to the east of Solom's Road, across from Owens Lane, just across the street from the Solom's Elementary School. This is to do a parking lot and trail system from the road back to the salt marsh. It does sit adjacent to a land trust property and Audubon Society property. And so it's actually $36,500 is requested to award Fuss and O'Neill the contract for design development, the permitting for Rhode Island CRMC, and the permit required for DOT, the physical alteration permit for Rhode Island DOT, and preparation of bid documents for construction for this project.
Okay.
Plus a 10% additional.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so it's 36,500 plus 3,600.
Correct. And I should mention too that the funding for this project is supported by Rhode Island DEM, Department of Environmental Management Recreational Trails Grant, that was awarded to the town in February last month for $88,000 with a 20% match for the total project cost of $110,000.
But this portion of that grant, the grant's been used for multiple projects, right?
This grant is just for the Harold Gibbs.
Just for this one.
Harold Gibbs Woods Trail Project, right?
Okay, I see.
This ask is just for the design development.
Right, got it.
And bid documents.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
I
explore this property with Phil. We couldn't use the shed either. But despite that, it is a gem. We are really looking at it. And back there up on the north face of the view, the water back there is great. And we know that they won't have education back there for the kids. So I think this is really, really lucky right to have an opportunity to do this. Just go back there when I was a kid.
Or there you go. It is somewhat complicated. It involves crossing a wetland, so that drives the permit fees up because it's more permanent work.
Okay. Okay, does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move to award Bussin O'Neill of Providence a bid for engineering services in the amount of $36,500 to include an additional 10% contingency for preparation of plans, permit documentation, and bid specifications for new trails and gravel parking lot at Harold Gibbs Woods on Stones Road.
Second, motion's been made and I've seconded it. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And no abstentions. That motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public hearing. This is discuss and act on ordinances. We have none to introduce, but we have two ordinances to also consider. The first one is 2022-4, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 169 taxation, Article 2 tax exemption for the elderly and totally disabled. I am opening the public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to be heard on this? Okay, seeing no one from the public, I will, Mike, can I close the public hearing just for, yeah. I'm closing the public hearing and now the council will consider it. This has been something I know that the tax assessor's office has been concerned about in terms of the work that's involved in this. Every time this comes up, though, I talk to Steve Boyage, who helped design this, and one of the things he says is we keep finding people who should be getting more money than they're asking. And so by them putting in the applications on a yearly basis, two things happen. One, there's an opportunity to help them. And two, there is a chance for us to make sure, because when people make their residence Florida, for example, often they do it for tax reasons, then they're no longer eligible for this. So in the past, we would have people who were getting this who weren't entitled to it just because nobody had thought to kind of say, okay, I'm done, I'm not a full-time Barrington resident. I understand the workload. I am opposed to this. I would recommend a couple of changes that I hope we don't need to amend the ordinance for. One of them is to 169.8. It's about the application, and it requires made under oath, and such supporting information from the assessor shall require. Mike, I don't think that necessarily means that we need a notary.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so we can have a document that says signing the page depending
There you go.
and so that the need for a notary, I don't think is. I think we've been having folks do that.
It's a lot to put people through for that situation.
Yeah.
Usually elderly people.
Yeah.
I recall that we removed that a couple of years ago. This came up, and I asked if a notary was required, and we were told no, that it wasn't.
Ken, are we still requiring notarization?
Yes, we are. Most of these applications come in by mail, those that aren't hand carried in. And if they come in by mail, they need to be notarized so that we can be sure that it's the person applying for the exemption that actually is applying and not some other person. And I will speak, if you don't mind, President Carroll, I will speak to the Florida issue. The state of Florida has very, very strict guidelines as far as their exemptions are. And once you declare your residency in Florida, they notify the municipality that you came from to make sure that there are no exemptions that are outstanding in your name in that state. So as far as catching people, the state of Florida not only catches people that do that, they also have very, very strict and very enforceable penalties for declaring you're a Florida resident and receiving an exemption elsewhere. So that problem that existed several years ago or many years ago doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, and as to the issue of folks who may be entitled to more than they think they're entitled to, did you want to address that?
Yeah, as far as that's concerned, as far as getting people and giving them the best benefit that is available to them, we're very careful in when transfers happen. So if a husband and wife are on a piece of property and one of them pass away, we do notify them that they need to reapply for the exemption so that we can see their income and whatnot. So we're very careful as far as making sure that everybody gets it and gets that. We advertise both on our website and in the Barrington Times, and also the senior center puts it in their news blast that these applications are available and to contact our office. So as far as that's concerned, I don't think we're missing people that are entitled to get it. This is more for those people that don't want to do the application process. They really don't want to give us any income information. They don't want to provide us with the documentation that we need in order to make sure that they're getting the best bang for the buck. Those are the ones we really are targeting with this resolution, with this ordinance. We're trying to target those people who say, listen, just give me the flat rate, let it go, and I'll deal with that. There are many, many of them, as I've seen in my research and looked at. There are 865 senior exemptions in the town of Barrington. Of that number, 539 of those people don't want to give us their income information. They just want the flat rate.
Okay.
In terms of administrative burden, what would the burden be to include a cover letter or a note with the tax bills that says if your income has changed since last year, please fill out the form because you may be entitled to more, to a larger credit?
We could put a notation on the back of the bill to include if there's been any change in your status, your income status, and you're an eligible senior, then you need to reapply. And that would probably eliminate that issue. You wouldn't want to put an added piece of paper in the tax bill because often they're not even looked at. They're thrown away. I've seen this in other municipalities I've worked in where you give them a flyer and you stick it in there and people say, what flyer? I never saw that. Well, it was on pink paper, and that there's a reason why we put it on pink paper so that you would see it. They don't even see it. People just throw it away.
Anyone else? I've stated my position. I'm opposed to the change for the reasons I've laid out. And I would encourage in any case, I don't think we need to have people notarize it. They would still be you could still prosecute if somebody were falsely filing any documents. I mean, there's first, if it's under oath, signed under the pains and penalties of perjury, but there's also a statute regarding falsification of official documents. So I think we can reduce that burden. That would help, regardless of how we end up voting on this.
That's a question for Ken. Ken, have you had experience with this type of exemption in other communities that you've been involved in?
I have. In the city of Warwick, when I was in Warwick, we had over 8,000 senior citizens that received a senior exemption, and they applied once, and that stayed with them. Very similar to the way our veterans exemption is today. Our veterans exemption, you come in, you make an application, and it stays on that property until you transfer it or sell it. And the senior exemption in other municipalities work very much the same way. You come in, you apply once. If it's an income-based exemption, naturally you would have an obligation to apply annually to make sure that you're getting the right amount of exemption. But yes, I've seen this in the past.
And Mr. Carl, you mentioned the town finding potential tax savings or the savings, right? Would it be savings or would it be the other way? Yes.
Additional relief.
Additional relief.
Yeah.
That's from the town perspective. From the residents' perspective, they could always refile in any other year if they themselves know that they have changed circumstances, not necessarily income-based, but otherwise.
Yes, they can. They can change at any time. Husbands and wives, one of them passes away, so their income situation changes. Then it's up to them to come in and make the application or to file the application and informing us of what that change is and make sure that they're getting everything that's applicable to their situation.
Thank you, and thanks for talking about your experience. I've actually been in favor of this one. I think for the efficiencies, I think something that's efficient for our tax office, I think is helpful, but also for seniors who, I understand that anything that's more administrative efficient for people to go through these steps, and if it's something that it will apply to them going forward, if they want to take advantage of it, if they themselves want to change how it's applied, and they can make that decision and do that. I think to me it gives them enough choice, gives it down, and then enough administrative efficiency that I'd be in favor of it.
That's where I am as well, with the caveat that I think it would be good, especially it sounds like it'd be even less of an administrative burden than I was thinking, but to include a line just encouraging people to refile if their circumstances changed, because that could help prevent the folks who are missing relief to which they're entitled.
Something like, you may be entitled to more relief.
But with that, unless there's something else, I'll make a motion to adopt 2022-4, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 169, Taxation, Article 2, tax exemption for the elderly and totally disabled, as presented.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. One opposition, and no abstentions or recusals. So that motion passes. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is 2022-9, the renewal of declaration of emergency. I'm opening the public hearing for this renewal of the declaration of emergency. Does anyone wish to be heard from the public? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, I'm closing the public hearing. Any discussion from the council, or are we ready to pass that motion? Yes, please.
I know that our emergency declaration is dependent on the state of emergency, which I noticed, at least the most recent one I could see, ends on the 13th. April 15th.
Right, so the state declaration is still in place as of this evening. Certain parts of it have disappeared, like one on the OMA obviously disappeared on March 31st. And we don't know yet if the General Assembly is going to continue beyond May 13th. So here's what I suggest. Continue your own to May 2nd. There's always that argument about the federal funds, and it's amazing what you could possibly be able to collect later. Obviously, if in fact everything ends on April 13th, you're local.
So the only thing I wanted to then ask is if the states does get extended and ours, then goes for the term. For next month, if we're going to be reviewing this, I'd like to see what other municipalities are doing at this time. It's hard to find because every town website are different, but I don't know if we can send something out to, I know you represent several, but to either solicitors or clerks throughout the state to find out what other communities are doing.
I can certainly let you know on the 5 other communities we represent. I'll know by May 2nd what they've all done. I can at least give you an anecdotal.
Okay. Great.
And the town clerks have a network that we blast out questions.
Oh,
that'd be great too.
Okay. I will make a motion to adopt 2022-9, renewal of declaration of emergency as presented. Seconded by Councilor Castel. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay. The next item is to set the agenda for the second meeting. I should say that the last one, the declaration of emergency, extends to May 10, Mike, just in case we always put it a little further.
Good one.
For May 2nd, we've been talking about short-term residential rental. This is the vacation, Airbnb, those things. Those are two, and those will be on our agenda. Did we introduce these already? Yes, we did. So we put it out a little bit longer. Ned Barton will report back to us hopefully on his discussions with the folks at the country club. And then we'll have a fine for littering by the public at Town Park or Town Beach that will be for the next agenda.
That one hasn't been introduced.
Okay. So
I'll be presenting something to your consideration.
Anything else we want to add to that?
I know, related to that, I know Parks and Rec had recently discussed whether at the festival course and just the general carry in, carry out policy. I don't know if that's something worth having another public discussion about because it comes up from time to time and there's reasons to say that carry in, carry out is result in less litter. And there are people who say having trash cans results in less litter. Just to discuss and look at that. Because not necessarily next meeting, but
yeah, I think if we're talking about this, it'll be sort of part of that discussion.
People.
Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
25 Watson, we think we'll have an agenda item for you to act on regarding 25 Watson.
Okay.
Even before the.
Again, it's always, if anybody has anything, feel free to drop me a note and we can put it on the agenda. Anything else? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Really, I'm ready.